Hey folks, welcome back, and hello if you're new. Something else today for the Shaun Attwood obsessives. So do remember to subscribe if you like this kind of thing. 4,000 other people can't be wrong, folks. Come on, hop on board. But if you don't like this kind of thing, please do go into the comments and give me your feedback. I think the most useful feedback I got recently was, your accent is horrible. Sounds like you're going to burp every 5 seconds. So that was valuable, constructive criticism. Thank you very much to the person who said that. Um, you have kind of got me wondering if the mic is maybe a little bit too close to my mouth. So I might actually buy a proper microphone. But today I would like to cover a topic that I've been meaning to do for over a month now. You might have actually heard Truthy on the What is Truth podcast that went out on the 17th of October talking about this. He's given away all my topics, so I thought I might as well just get on with it, although we did discuss it beforehand, and he was as surprised as I was to see that Shaun was actually recommending this particular book to people. Just in case you missed it, the What is Truth podcast that was on was yesterday at the time of recording this video. Was actually excellent. He had Anne Dragine on. Now, I'm very thankful that she clarified the pronunciation of her name. Thank you, Anne. It was really great to hear your conversation with Truthy. Both of you very, very good to listen to, and I thought you made an excellent team, to be honest. But Truthy mentioned that Shaun's favourite book was The 48 Laws of Power, and he, much like myself, hinted at the fact that this is quite an odd favourite book to have for somebody, especially of Shaun's age. Now, whether it actually is his favourite book, I don't know, but it's certainly a book that he has recommended on more than one occasion. I've seen two separate videos at least where he has been asked what books he recommends, and he says he gets a question all the time. His first recommendation is always The 48 Laws of Power. It's a kind of book, in my opinion, that a pickup artist would absolutely swear by. The author, Robert Greene, has actually written multiple books on human psychology, focusing really on how to manipulate people. One of the books is actually about seduction, and it's very similar to the 48 Laws of Power. This book refers to, the seduction book refers to targets and victims and marks and all this kind of weird stuff, which, for something along the lines of a seduction manual is unusual terminology to use. That maybe gives you an idea of the kind of author we're dealing with. If you're the kind of person that utilizes books like The 48 Laws of Power as more than just an interesting read or an interesting look into the psychology of the author, if you're looking at it as useful tips to use in your life, then I have to say that I pity you more than anything else, I'm afraid. Now, specifically regarding the 48 Laws of Power, I'm not going to say that the information isn't true or good to know, but it's how you use it, and that's the thing. And it's a very cynical view of human nature as well. It ties the book together. That's where my problem lies, really. I just find the whole thing quite adolescent. This is the kind of book that, well, I'll go through the chapters in a second, but the mottos and the ideas that come out of this book are the same kind of thing that you'd expect to hear from a 14-year-old who's just started to realise that they can sometimes manipulate people and has started to identify with that side of their personality, thinking that they're some kind of master of dark psychological tactics and skills. I think many of us probably have been there when we were teenagers. I know I certainly have been, but you grow out of it as you get older and wiser, and you certainly hope that you'd grow out of it anyway. Maybe I'm just giving away too much of my own personality there, but I think we do have, all of us, a few of the traits of Machiavellianism, which is effectively what the 48 Laws of Power is about. It's a Machiavellian handbook. Now, this is Shaun Attwood's most recommended book, and I'm going to go over some of the chapter titles, as I said, in this video. just the ones that I think are most applicable to Shaun Attwood. I'm not going to go over all of them. They quite possibly all do apply to him, but there's a lot of things we don't know about Shaun Attwood. We don't know too much about his personal life, not publicly anyway. I've certainly heard a few things, but they're all off the record. On the record, we don't know much about his personal life, and I would say that that's a good thing, and we don't really want to be honest. What we've found out with the recent Daddygate scandal is plenty, in my opinion. But if you've been following the Daddygate scandal involving Shaun Attwood, then a few of these chapters might raise your eyebrows slightly, being that this is one of his most recommended books, or his most recommended book. So the first chapter that stood out for me on this one was chapter 3, which was Conceal Your Intentions. This is an interesting one, especially in the context of Daddygate, where Shaun claims to have set up a fake prank involving him getting pleasured by one of his podcast guests, who was said to be a vulnerable trafficking and abuse victim. We all know the story. We also know that they're standing by this description because they set up a GoFundMe on that basis, on the victim status of this person. And that GoFundMe is still live. It's collected several £1,000s so far from the audience of Shaun Attwood, and it's still open for donations. So they're obviously still going by that vulnerable trafficking and abuse victim description. I would say that Shaun has fitted in quite well with chapter 3, the third law of power, in concealing his intentions, because he openly boasts of concealing his intentions. Whether we believe him or not is a totally different story. If you believe it was a prank, then fair enough, more power to you, I suppose. I personally don't believe it was a prank, but he boasted that it was a prank. He boasted of his ability to carry out this prank under the noses of everyone and fool the other person who leaked this information, which was Andrew Greene. So he's boasting of concealing his intentions. We're also led to believe that he had a double life. If you recall, he's supposed to be a stockbroker, whilst simultaneously he was supplying the local addicts of his town with methamphetamine. So this, I would say, is also concealing your intentions to an extent. Now, the next chapter that stuck out, which I thought was quite funny, was chapter 5. I'm not saying Shaun did this. This is one that you might actually need to reread. But the fifth law of power is guard your reputation with your life because so much depends on it. His reputation is down the toilet at the moment in some circles. So as I say, I think you just might want to reread this chapter more than anything else. So much depends on reputation, so guard it with your life. Well, I think you might wish you'd actually done that a bit better, to be honest. But then chapter 6, court attention at all costs. So it might actually be the case that Shaun Attwood sees there's no problem with the negative publicity that he's been getting. There's no such thing as bad publicity in the minds of some people. And he certainly is courting attention at all costs at the moment. I would say it's been quite costly. But he's boasting that the so-called trolls, presuming that be me and other channels, that have been talking about him in a negative fashion recently. He said about me, he said that on a couple of occasions, he's actually just replied to people saying that I'm an obsessed troll. But he could also be talking about Anne, who he originally called a troll for exposing the Daddygate stuff in the first place. Or he might be talking about Truthy, whose live chat he actually entered. Shaun Attwood came into Truthy's live chat last week and just gave false information about things, sowing some seeds of doubt, I suppose. Or maybe Shaun's just talking about, when he says trolls, he might just be talking about everybody on the internet, the whole section of the internet that doesn't believe for 1 second that he would have stripped and photographed a vulnerable podcast guest in his own home as a prank. But either way, he says that we are responsible for boosting his viewing figures. So he is, in my opinion, courting attention at all costs. He's quite happy with the outcome, supposedly. according to his own words, of everything that's going on at the moment. Another thing he did which court's attention at all costs is the fact that he was actually streaming audio from the Maxwell court hearing. He was doing this in front of an audience of up to 10,000 at one point. Now, this is not legal, it's not moral, it's actually jeopardizing potentially a trial, in my opinion. If you really wanted to go as extreme as you could say that it's jeopardizing a trial. He's supposed to care about this Maxwell trial. He's supposed to have, a great deal of interest in justice being served here. But he's on YouTube, he's holding up signs telling people to record the audio themselves as well. And it's just damaging the interests of justice, in my opinion. So yeah, I would say that's courting attention at all costs, all right. Then we'll get to chapter 7, which is to get others to do the work for you, but always get the credit. This one's very easy to work out. His entire model on his channel, I'm not going to hate on him too much for it, but his entire model on his channel is reading articles word for word in his videos. And that's hard work, to be that straight down the line of, I'm really going to do no work whatsoever of my own here. I'm literally just going to read out someone else's work word for word, to not even amalgamate a couple of articles or take information from a couple of different sources and sum things up in his own words. Just reading it word for word and then lapping up the credit when people tell him, thank you for exposing this. It's got some gall to do that, I think. He's obviously onto a good thing. There's other YouTubers that do it as well. But he's the only one that I see that just does it without giving any opinion of his own. He just reads it out word for word and then takes the credit. So he knows exactly what he's doing. As I say, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's actually a really good way to run a channel, but it fits in with this law of power quite nicely. The next interesting one was Law 8, which is to make others come to you and use bait if necessary. So we can all see that other people do come to him to appear on his podcast, and you could take a very cynical view and say that the podcast is in a way used as bait. He makes a show out of getting people on, and as Truthy said, he uses their horrific stories of abuse as a form of entertainment. It's showbiz. These people want to get their stories out. They've got legitimate reasons in many cases for wanting that. But he's using his massive audience and his platform as a way to get them on, to come on to his show and exploit their story as a show business model. And that is the nature of show business, minus the abuse. So I'm not going to go too hard on him for the format of the podcast, but it does fit with this law of power, and he is probably well aware of that because he's recommending this book to people. So you can only assume that he has definitely read this book. Now, Law 11 is to learn to keep people dependent on you. I did say this was a weird favourite book to have, wasn't it? So learn to keep people dependent on you. Now, with him being a large-scale supplier of crystal meth, which is an extremely addictive drug, he was pushing that out into the community that he'd inserted himself into. He created a massive underground sub-market, subculture of addicted, dependent people. Victims, basically. Many of these people will have died, most likely, as a result of their addiction. So I think it's pretty clear that he would have learned very quickly to keep people dependent on him is a very, very good way to make money. Law 15 was the next one that stood out to me, which was crush your enemy totally. This links to Anne very clearly, because what did he say about Anne on his apology with Sonia Poulton? If you remember right, he said he wanted to take her down, to destroy her totally, and to focus on her as a military target. Now, Anne made herself Shaun's enemy by exposing something about him, something that he didn't want to get out there. Despite the fact that she had a very low amount of subscribers at that point, she had about 300 subscribers at the time. And for some reason, people don't like it when I say that. They think I'm trying to throw insults around. I'm not trying to throw insults around at all. I'm well aware that I've got a very low amount of subscribers. It's not some sort of ego thing. It's literally just how the English language works, I'm afraid. That I have to say that she only had 300 subscribers at the time. It's not an insult. I think she's up to about 6 or 7 now, thousand. Now, Shaun, with his YouTube following of 500,000 people at the time, decided that Anne, with her 300 subscribers, was a legitimate target to be crushed totally, in his own words. I don't believe he was actually trying to do that. He wasn't trying to crush her. There was no trolling going on. He was actually just trying to engage in a cover-up when he was exposed for his misdeeds involving his podcast guest. But his words were that he wanted to destroy Anne as he viewed her as a military target. This fits in very well with crush your enemy totally. It can also be seen in the false flagging campaign that has sprung up and is attempted to be ongoing at the moment, with a little channel that's connected to Shaun Attwood and his guest. A lot of obvious connections between them, setting up messages and asking people to flag down channels like myself and What Is Truth. This is also trying to go straight for someone's channel, trying to remove someone's channel. I really don't care if you get my channel taken down, but I just don't know when these people will learn. If you've got a grievance on YouTube with something that someone said, just make a video on it, reply, prove them wrong, point out where they're incorrect. Don't try to instigate the removal of your enemy's channels. That's like me suddenly coming on the scene and just going straight after Shaun's channel or the channels of other people. It would just be pathetic. It would be over the top. That's all I've really got to say on that one. To be honest, it fits in very well with crush your enemy totally. I'm not saying Shaun is engaged in false flagging, but he is connected to an account or accounts that are doing it. Now, the next one is Law 21. This one stood out to me more as a bit of fun, which was play a sucker to catch a sucker. So effectively just pretend that you're dumber than your mark, basically. And I sometimes wonder if Shaun Attwood is actually doing this because, well, as Truthy said, Shaun Attwood, wherever he goes, he leaves a trail of stupidity. Very, very funny comment, and I completely agree. But I just wonder, like, is he really tripping himself up so often by accident? Or is he just playing 4D chess? Is he pretending to be a sucker to catch a sucker somehow? I'm sure that's the way he'd put it anyway. I just thought I'd put that one out there as a bit of fun thought. Now, Law 25 is recreate yourself. I thought this one was very interesting. So how many times have we seen Shaun Attwood do this? First of all, he was a nerdy finance geek, and then he was a US-based stockbroker and self-made millionaire. Then he was an ecstasy kingpin, although we know he was selling a lot of crystal meth to the area that he was in. In fact, crystal meth deaths actually tripled in his territory while he was operating, and then they dropped by half when he went to jail. So there certainly seems to be some correlation there. But he left the methamphetamine business out of his little story that he tells about himself, and he basically says that he was an ecstasy trafficker. So that's reinventing yourself. He went to jail, he wrote John's jail journal, he came out to a ready-made YouTube channel made by his dad, and he set himself up as an author, an activist, and a true crime YouTuber. And now he's a self-appointed head of the war on paedophiles and all things sexual abuse related. So he is very adept at reinventing himself. Now, if you want more information about the crystal meth deaths that occurred while Shaun was operating, I'll put a link in the description to a channel, Poet Laundrette. He's done a great video on it. I think he was actually the first person to expose that information. So you can go and check out his channel. He's got quite a few videos, and he has a video specifically going over the stats related to the deaths that were occurring around Shaun Attwood when he was operating in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, law 26 is keep your hands clean, which I believe Shaun Attwood knows all too well is something that needs to be done. So, for example, did he appear in any of the prank photographs? Nope. It was just the other participant that appeared in them, the nude photos, etc. If it was a prank, why would he not be appearing in them, himself? Surely photographs that were supposed to be bait to somebody to prank someone into getting the wrong end of the stick, surely those photographs would contain you in them as well, would they not? Rather than just the other person. Did he speak in the daddy video? No, he did not. Only the other person in the video spoke. That was also the only person that was visible in the video. Did he run drugs himself when he was operating as a methamphetamine supplier? Nope, he did not. He had runners and he had people importing it for him as well. He wasn't doing the dirty work himself, and he kept his phone calls clean as well. Certainly, he kept most incriminating language off his phone calls. He also, I was going to use the word threatens, but he also suggests to people that wild man may get involved in things. So he's using the names of other people to try and enforce his will. He's insinuating that one of his heavies will be on you if you carry on saying X, Y, or Z piece of information about him. So he knows it's important to keep your hands clean. Now, law 27 is where it gets to the real stuff, I thought. This was play on people's need to believe in order to create a cult-like following. Shaun Attwood knows fine well that a massive amount of his audience are so-called truthers, a label that has been, I don't know where it came from, I don't know if anyone puts themselves in that category, but they're so-called truthers, people who are absolutely convinced that there's various dark conspiracies afoot. And I'm not saying there's not. I believe there almost definitely are. It'd be very strange if there wasn't dark conspiracies taking place in the world. But people are adding their own ideas to things without so much evidence. And Shaun Attwood doesn't know what they are, these conspiracies. He's got no evidence of any of them. I've never seen him provide any evidence of any of these conspiracies that he claims are going on. But he certainly plays on people's belief in such things, as I actually demonstrated in another video. If you search for the word pedo on his channel, you get dozens upon dozens of video results, probably over 100 results, and videos that seem to have nothing to do with that topic. They just come up when you search it on his channel. Not only that, but he basks in a reputation which is totally unjustified, and he knows that it's unjustified, which is the reputation that he's an exposer of paedophiles and abusers, when in fact, obviously, he just reads other people's articles. He also refused to allow a podcast guest to expose a sexual abuser to his audience. Somebody sexually assaulted her, and he wanted to hide that fact. He wanted to hide that abuse so that he could interview the abuser instead about a totally unrelated topic. That's true. I've done a video on that. I'll put a link in the description to that one. Now, surely when people are constantly giving you credit for exposing things or giving you credit for something that you haven't done, you should show some humility and respond that, I'm simply covering the news and I'm not actually exposing anything myself. But he just plays on people's need to believe in order to maintain this rabid fan base of gullible people who are really thick in the conspiracy mindset. I would say that this is creating a cult-like following by using people's need to believe in a cause. It's sad, it's unfortunate. I mean, a lot of his fans, I'm not having a go at everyone who's a fan of his at all, that would just be ridiculous. But a lot of his fan base are people that have potentially been abused. When bad things happen to you, it's very often possible that you will start to see it or feel that it's around you all the time or expect it to be. And I believe that Shaun Attwood is playing on that feature of human psychology in relation to people in his audience who may be victims of things. Whether they're right or wrong in their assumptions about the world is not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is Shaun Attwood doesn't know whether they're right or wrong in their assumptions, but he's happy to stoke that flame in their minds. Law number 30 is make your accomplishments seem effortless. Now, he does do this. It's always a red flag to me when someone does this, but he never credits anyone else for helping him in his success. Always, in my view, he appears to take full credit for everything he's achieved. We all know that there's no such thing as self-made, or anyone sensible does. There's always luck, there's always circumstance, there's always other people. And he fails to mention that it doesn't take a genius to make money selling crystal meth to dealers and addicts. So he does certainly make his accomplishments seem effortless, and he certainly makes them seem like they're all about him, as if he's some kind of genius that's always going to be successful no matter what he does. Now, Law 32 is play to people's fantasies, quite similar to Law 27, which was create a cult-like following around people's need to believe. Playing to people's fantasies ties into that. The need to believe that the world is run by paedophile elites, that's a fantasy that many people hold in their head. I'm not saying it's a fantasy in the good way, but it's certainly, it's something that a lot of people do believe. And Shaun is more than happy to stoke that, as I said. But also regarding his podcast, he gets on people who are criminals, gangsters, self-described gangsters, and he allows them to indulge in their fantasies about themselves, talking about their most interesting stories, most likely bigging themselves up beyond what is actually the case in many cases, or in some cases at least. He's basically allowing these people to come on and boast about their criminal careers and what interesting people they are, playing to their own fantasies of them being worthy of some kind of celebration or importance. There has been a lot of great guests on his show, and absolutely not everyone's like that. Not even all the criminals have been like that at all, but it's undeniable that he does play to people's fantasies successfully, and that's, a large part of the format of his podcast. Law 37 is create compelling spectacles. We all know that he does this. He puts the most graphic descriptions in his thumbnails. He presents the most grotesque information to his audience, involving eating babies and basically unspeakable things. The most monstrous stuff that you can think of, really. And that creates a compelling spectacle, unfortunately, to many people. And that's his format. More and more it's getting darker and darker as well. He's started collaborating with someone else now, this Ron Swanson guy. The titles of some of the videos that they're doing are actually quite sickening. They're quite repulsive. And that's what they use as clickbait to draw people in. So I think most people would tend to recoil to that when you see those titles. I personally don't get it myself, but that is creating a compelling spectacle. I know a lot of people will say that that's just the harsh, sickening reality of life and it needs to be shown, but it just doesn't sit right with me personally. Compelling spectacle it is, though. Basically sensationalizing these topics. Now there's plenty more. I'm just going to skip to the last law, which is Law 48, which is to assume formlessness. I'm only putting this in as a joke, but I just wonder if assuming formlessness is where Shaun got the idea for his yoga meditation self that he seems unable to describe and completely uninterested in talking about in any other context other than when he's making an apology. There's quite a lot to pick through on the book itself. The Machiavellian personality type, or personality trait, whatever you want to call it, it's really interesting to look into. Obviously, it's not possible for me or anyone else to diagnose another person with a personality disorder or anything like that, unless it's like a psychologist and their client or something like that, their own client. But Shaun Attwood, I think, recommending this book, he would wear the label quite proud, a proud Machiavellian, I think. That's just my assumption on him. There's something about those kinds of personality types that do take pride in that kind of thing. And as I alluded to before, I see it as all very adolescent. It kind of reminds me a little bit in a teenage version of myself and other people that I have had experience with. It's kind of as if he's got stuck at a certain developmental stage almost. As I say, we've all got Machiavellian traits. It's just to model your life on a book about being Machiavellian as much as you possibly can in order to get power suggests certainly a keen interest in it, more of a lifestyle choice by Shaun there. Anyway, folks, I'm going to leave it there because the video is getting long. I'm going to link up with Truthy soon. I think we're going to have some kind of conversation. I did mention this in my video about the end of free speech in Scotland, and the feedback that I got was very positive on that. If you've not seen that video, you can check it out. There's some dark stuff happening in Scotland at the moment. You might be saddened or angry, like myself, regarding that. But me and Truthy, like I say, we're gonna link up. We're gonna have a chat, and I think this topic might be a good one to talk about Machiavellian personality and things like that, related specifically to the Shaun Attwood situation, of course. So anyway, folks, I'm going to leave it there. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this kind of thing. Give the video a like if you liked it. And you can check out my other videos too. I do have a few on Shaun Attwood. If you're looking for a roundup of the Daddygate situation, obviously, then my past videos is the place to go. You can also check out Poet Laundrette and, of course, What is Truth? Two great channels covering the same great, interesting topics that we're all obsessed with, of course. So cheers, folks. Thanks for tuning in as always, and I'll catch you on the next one.